Hello guys, coming at you with another video today. Just give you a little announcements before I head into this video and the topic that I'm going to be teaching you today. My review of a book about this is certain experience in the Civil War will be coming out tomorrow. I'll make the video tomorrow and I'll post that up to you on my channel, and I'll give you that little experience. I'll give you a little bit of history. I'll see if I can post some links down below so you can know a little bit more about what medicine was like during the Civil War and how these surgeons were actually unsung heroes trying to save men's lives. So I will give you a scoop on that. But while we're waiting, I'm going to teach you a little topic today, since it's the week of Memorial Day. It's a very, very solemn day that we remember the 1 million men and women who died while serving in the military to serve our country and defend our country. And it seems a lot sometimes, though, that when you look at the context of Memorial Day, it actually came out of the Civil War. It came out of the war being the most bloodiest war that was ever fought in American history. Now, estimates are saying now, with recent studies and population statistics, specifically at that time and around 1860 and around today, now we're calculating, now experts are saying that 750,000 have become casualties. And I believe that number now, because I believe there were reports that were either misdiagnosed or were lost to history, no cliche there, and there was just a lot more things that needed to be processed. So it's really complicated terms. But anyways, coming out of that, they wanted to find a way to honor these soldiers, because remember, 750,000, that's a big number. That includes I believe it was 2/3 of the white population in the South died during the war. North lost more men than the South. And it touched a really big, huge point on how brutal and bloody this war was. And they wanted, and also kind of destroy the ideals of the good death. And there's a book that talks about called This Republic of Suffering, which talks about death during the Civil War. I really highly recommend it. It's really good if you want to talk about how this war impacted people personally, on how they should die well and how they should die a good death. And so that's what Memorial Day is centered around. And how it started was called Decoration Day. It started mainly in the North and the South after the war. They would go to soldier cemeteries and decorate the graves. You put a Confederate flag on this grave, or a U.S. flag on there. And people started noticing that, and it would later become catched on as a really traditional American observance, if you might say. And it really had a touch on how, just mainly how the war impacted people. And it was also a point where during these things, they also noticed that the erection of statues became a huge thing to symbolize Memorial Day as a whole. And it's really interesting when you think about it, because once it started to catch on ground, the U.S. government started to notice that, and they wanted to institute a day where they can honor the soldiers who died and observe it. So it wasn't an official holiday designated and around the time after the Civil War. Only a couple of years later, about 25 years later, I believe, it was a couple decades right after the end of the war of 1865, and it literally just started right around 1887, I believe it was, when it became an official holiday. Congress signed it in General Order number 11. I can't remember the specific individual. I think his name was John Logan, General John Logan, who was a part of a veterans group called the Grand Army of the Republic, which was a Union veterans group that wanted to spread awareness of the Civil War and teach generations about the war and how to honor the men who fought and died in the war. And Confederates, again in the South, they did this too, but they have specific. What's really interesting about this, though, is that in the South, even today, they still have specific Memorial Days. And I read an article recently talking about people going out to Confederate graves and actually putting Confederate flags on there, decorating the graves there for the Confederate soldiers. And it touches on that issue too. It's like whether we should honor soldiers who fought to try to destroy the United States, when termed that they also fought just as bravely as the Union soldiers did. But that's a different video for another time. I'm just talking about Memorial Day. Anyway, what is interesting about it is that it kind of came out of a way of how the culture shifted in this time. Because once Memorial Day became the official holiday, it was mainly instituted as more of a way to remember those who died. And then there was a big, huge cultural shift. And now, when you see with Memorial Day, with um, shopping, good pricing, going to baseball game. I did that on Memorial Day. I went to a baseball game. Recreation and going to the beach. Some people even recognize it as the official start of summer, even though it's June 21st. You know, because we're still in spring right now, so it's a little interesting to kind of see how the things intertwine with one another. And it really just shows just how it shifted really rapidly. And there was a report where I can't remember what the president's name was, but I think it was William Howard Taft, one newspaper. I think it was the Cincinnati Enquirer. I don't remember what the newspaper was, but they caught him fishing on Memorial Day when he should be actually at a gravesite honoring soldiers who died. And this is where the issue of, oh, how do we define how people die? How do we define how we live our lives because of men dying and women dying for our country and trying to protect us for the freedoms that we enjoy? And that's a really interesting context in that point, because that's where it started a little shift. I was reading a Times article a little bit earlier, and it talked about how this culture shift kind of created the Memorial Day a little bit more complex and a little bit more interesting as well, because people now started, like I said, they wanted to go shopping, go frolicking, go to do some recreational stuff, go to a baseball game. Again, like with my example, I went to a baseball game. I was hoping that my family and I could go to the Memorial Day parade before, but we decided not to this year, and that made me really sad. But anyway, it's when you learn about Memorial Day, it's a very specific variance as to how the thing. Crap. So again, back with that cultural shift, you notice the cultural shifts between how people just wanted to observe Memorial Day, and it also touches on how the issue futility, sometimes how war is, how horrific it can be. And that's a thing where people decide, like, why are we relaxing when we should be remembering those who died in very bloody battles and bloody wars? And specifically with that number of mine, keep that in mind, 1 million servicemen and women died while serving in the military. And that's a big number that died for our country. And that's what the issue of the Grand Army of the Republic took too, was how do you define how you remember? And it's a really interesting way of how Memorial Day now still stands today. You go to a Memorial Day parade, you go and honor, or you go to a cemetery, or go to a loved one's cemetery, you decorate the grave, you stand by them. Besides, I remember after the ball game, actually, I went to Woodsman's National Cemetery, which is outside Miller Park, and it's a national cemetery, and I decided, hey, folks, if you don't mind, I'd like to just walk through the cemetery and just have a little reflection moment. And that's what I did. It kind of shows you gives you a little reflection on how these people died. And it's a very interesting point as to how it just really sticks out to people. And when Memorial Day was created, it kind of had a little difficulties, between how honoring death is one thing and how relaxing is one thing. So it's very complex. It's a very complicated way. And Memorial Day has always been it's been another holiday that I like. I put as like another favorite holiday of mine, next to Christmas and 4th of July. And it's just really, people try to get market off of that, which is what kind of makes people a little bit more weird. And it also just really shows the complexity of how Memorial Day really how it should be remembered. So I hope that gives a little takeaway, because Memorial Day was created, the Grand Army of the Republic really endorsed that too, because they would go at these places in the nation, and you go to these graves and decorate graves of soldiers. They just want to have a day where they can be remembered or observed. And same thing with the Confederacy as well. Look at the South. They really honored the soldiers who died on their side as well. And it's a really complicated issue too. But that could be another video for another time. I know I sound like repeated it there, but I'm just doing the best I can. I'm sorry, you guys. That phone really threw me off. I didn't know what that phone call was coming from. So hopefully it doesn't mess up the video. So anyways, just want to give you a little thoughts on, teach you a little bit about the context, historical meaning of Memorial Day. If I can, I'll post a link in the description box so you guys can research more about it. I'll include the Time article. I'll include the USA Today article about how Americans now kind of seem to forget the meaning of that. And if you want to look up videos of Americans reacting to Memorial Day, it's really shocking. And that's another thing too. I'm going to touch on here right now is when you look at certain polls right now, a couple high percentage of Americans have no idea Memorial Day's meaning, and that's where the whole entire issue of marketing off Memorial Day kind of destroys what the real intended purposes of Memorial Day is. And it's really an interesting development, seeing how Americans now are forgetting the real meaning of Memorial Day and why they're enjoying the things they have today. But it's really sad though too to know that, see that people think that's, oh, it's just another day off from work, or just, oh, I can go party all day and I can, it's a 3-day weekend, we get to relax and all that stuff. And that's where the whole contradiction of honoring and leisure time can really be complex and complicated. And it really shows you how people just sometimes have lost touch with it. So anyways, I thank you guys for watching this video. Sorry for the disruption there in the phone call. Hope you guys learned a little bit from this video. I'll include links in the description box. If you like this video, give it a like. Click subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you can get new videos that I post every day. If you like that, share this with your friends if you liked it, if this was interesting to you. And I'm officially U.S. History Buff. I'll see you guys later. Have a blessed day.